happy Katiba Day and welcome to the conversation that we'll be having this hour. And we're looking at if things have changed, and we're looking at whether they remain the same or what direction that we are going into. Joining us this morning for the conversation is the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, and that is Jeremiah Kioni. He joins us this morning. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Kama wa Kenya tu, tunapambana, tunaamuka. We wake up and sleep. But we thank God we arrive.
Indeed.
And the struggle continues.
I have to say I love your color combinations this morning. You've done a good job with the red and the blues and, you know, the reds, the rest we you know.
Najua red ni Jubilee.
It's a power color.
Then he's also sporting some
red shoes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we'll ask him later how much they cost.
We'll also ask you selling your glasses.
Yeah.
You have a red outfit.
The odd one out, but he has something red also. Yeah.
Sour. Okay. We're getting into it morning, and the man with the red cup also went to Seychelles, and he's coming back with Proverbs, Jeremiah. And we'd love to hear what your interpretation of it is.
All right.
Yeah, so Seychelles, a country whose economy is run by tourism because they have beautiful sandy beaches next to Kwale. You know, Kwale was voted the best tourist city with white beaches.
Oh, I thought you were saying there's a Kwale in Seychelles.
But he also sold the Murima Hills.
The Murima Hills. Okay. Yeah, but then again, if you talk about the economy as well, fisheries is big, especially the tuna fish. They fish a lot of that and sell. But let's go to the proverb today. Strike when the iron is hot. Strike when the iron is hot. How would you interpret that?
I think that is what Gachagua is doing. You deal with things when it's the right time. Strike when the iron is hot. He's still striking it. It's very hot and it's nice for him. Yeah. I think he's dealing with the issues when they should be dealt with, without wishing them away or procrastination. Yes, avoid procrastination.
Seizing the opportunity.
Yes, when it is available.
When it's available.
Yes.
Well put, well said.
And I think that is also being done by those in power. They are seizing the opportunity to seize us to the maximum possible. I've just talked about Murima Hills. You talked about Kwale. You should find out what is in the Murima Hills. And who is going to Australia to sign a contract in the month of November, because it's already sold because of its rare earth qualities.
Oh, here we go.
That's a debate for another day.
Well, it could be the debate for today. We'll get into it because essentially we're talking about constitutionalism and we're looking at Katiba 15.
He has decided to strike there.
Strike while the iron is hot.
Yes.
When it's hot. Yes.
Well, so let's get into it, shall we? Because we're looking into this conversation, Jeremiah, and even as we do, there are certain things that we must ask. 15 years after the promulgation of the Constitution over Uhuru Park, and we talk about this, it was 27th August 2010. And when the big flag was hoisted, there was expectation in the air that there would be a law now that had changed things a little bit, and that Kenya would then be operating under a different dispensation. From where you sit, 2025, on this day, do you see that dream has become a reality?
On the 26th of August 2010.
26th, yeah.
I remember I went myself and another, Drito Muriithi, and I think Abdulkadir Mohammed, who was chairing the Constitutional, the Parliamentary Select Committee on the Constitution, PSC. We went over to the office of the President. And
the day before promulgation.
The day before, and the big question that was there was, now that we have done all that needed to be done, and I think it's good to commend people like Martha Karua, because Martha Karua is one of the champions, or the person who was able to get the constitution pathway, what we needed to do, when and after what, which had been a problem there before. I remember that day we woke up and went to the office of the President, and the question was, now tomorrow we are giving ourselves a new constitution. What role do we play tumekuwa tukifanya kampeni kubwa kuiuza, and now we can see that the big day is coming, and we found like we had no role. That is the nature of politics. And again, we also had now the Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, whom we also didn't know which role he was going to play in that whole process. We had Parliament that we also wanted to find out what were they going to do come the following day. And one of the very interesting things that we were told by, I think that time it was called Kehara, just as a way of dealing with the first issues. They said Mzee Kibaki and Mudaura are seated in State House, and when they come out, they will give us the way forward. And nobody had answers. And sure to it, they came out at around 5. And by 9 o'clock in the night, 10 o'clock, they knew what they needed to do the following day. And it all system go. Why? Because there was a point at which, when you are moving from the old constitution to the new constitution, where we were not sure who was in charge. And that woman needed to have been managed very nicely. And that's another story we can tell another day. Dennis is here to do the investigative journalism. Here at our vizuri. You can look at the pictures at Uhuru Park. A little bit of jostling, elbowing to ensure that you remember after the constitution, Raila had now to be given to sign like he was being a contract. Very interesting transition of things. But we are here 15 years later, and while we have a lot that we can complain about, and we should complain about, we are disappointed about, I think it's also good to take cognizance of the fact that a lot has been achieved. If it wasn't for the 2010 constitution, with the kind of executive that we have today, we would be doing very, very, very badly, worse off than we are doing today.
So you're saying that the constitution served as a buffer?
It does, because this issue of the sovereign power of the people, sovereign power belongs to the people. You may take it like it is kitu tu imeandikwa, but the fact that Kenyans became aware that actually they have power over their leaders, that was not there before. During Moi's time and even Kibaki's time. Ilikuwa ukiona mtu ya serikali na crown ama gari imepita na GK, unagonga kwa kichaka if you're in the rural areas. But people, that has helped Kenyans to say no to some things. When you are being arrested, you say why. We have not been able to deal with the corruption the way we should have dealt with it, even when we are aware of that power. But it is something that we must celebrate and perhaps continue helping Kenyans understand how to make use of that provision. But also, those of us who are there under the old constitution, we know there was no separation of power. The president was the one in charge of the judiciary, in charge of executive, running parliament. Parliament was being run like a section, not even a department within the office of the president. That we can see separation of power as whether we have achieved what we wanted. No doubt we are far from it. We have the 5, that time, those days ilikuwa uingia ofisi, alafu Mwenyezi Mungu ndio atakutoa pale pengine ukikufa. But we now are certain that after every 5 years, Kenyans have an opportunity to go back and decide whether to go on with the same mess or get themselves out of it. I mentioned the judiciary and all those other issues. We have the issues of devolution is another major achievement under the new constitution. As to whether the money that we give, over 400 billion shillings that go into the counties, is it being used for what we intended to do? Another big question. I would say no. We may have failed on the issue of accountability and perhaps ensuring that the resources that went to the counties, we can be able to account for them. I am happy that we also have the economic rights in the constitution. That was not there before. Right to education, health, shelter, all these things. The fact that, again, are we celebrating them the way, or are we making progress like we should have done? Somebody will say so in housing, but again, we can see how it has been, that right has been used by those in power to get us poorer. The rights to expression, association, and all the rest, media houses, If it was Kanu's day, hii amuka naye leo, ungekuwa umeenda bali sana hii. So and we must celebrate you, the Standard Group. You have done us proud. You are almost the only media house that has kept us. We wake up to look at your headlines. Umesema nini? Not because we are very happy when we hear that Kenya is it's a scandalous country or it's a crime scene, but it's being reported that that's a way of oversighting. And we know it comes with a cost to it.
Yeah.
You will suffer, but I hope one day it will pay. It is already paying. So a couple of things that we can continue talking about. So it's 15 years later, a couple of things that we can be happy about. Many other issues that also required to have been handled better, but the issue of representation is still something that we fear. We had thought that by this time we would have, more, would have dealt with the unequal levels of representation within our institution and especially within Parliament. That is still out there and pending. The commissions, we had many constitutional commission, which was also supposed to have been another major achievement for us as a country. But those who have been charged with the responsibility of running those commissions are the ones who've failed us, because they have failed to exert the authority that has been given to them by the Constitution.
Which commissions are we talking
Parliament
about?
Also failed and has continued to fail. I was part of it and I tried what I could. Maybe I should have done better also. But one of the things that made the Constitution Commissions weak is the fact that while we provided very nicely for them in the Constitution, the oversighting was not made as clear as it should be. We should have created specific committees in Parliament, and I know I put that motion and even those provisions in when I was the chairman of CIOC. We needed them to be oversighted by a committee in Parliament that was not under the departmental committees. Because if you do not have independence of your budget, it becomes very difficult for you to execute the mandate.
And was this for the express reason of the implementation of the Constitution? You needed a committee for that?
If you, the committees exist, CIOC exists. And the work of CIOC is perhaps to ensure that the Constitution continues being implemented and the ideals that were, we continue benefiting from what the ideals were from the beginning. But that's also
so you needed an external body to ensure that these other committees were working?
You see, we have, for example, when you talk about IEBC, IEBC is oversighted by the Legal Affairs Committee.
Yes.
It is the same committee that has the AG's office and all the other. So when they are robbing for money, you do not rob money for IEBC. The IEBC money is robbed at the ministry. I think IEBC is a little better. I should have used something like maybe POA. That the money is released, the vote is released under the same ministry. And the original problem was that we needed to get these commissions away from the executive, control of the executive, so that they can be able to address the issues of Kenyans better. But what happened is that slowly, every person who's come into the executive has made every attempt to put them under the ministry, under the PS or under the CS, under the PS. And that has denied Kenyans of perhaps gains that we should have seen. Maybe if we had been able to provide better for the IPOA, not that I blame that aspect alone. Perhaps the killings that we saw by police officers may have been reduced substantially. But
on that note, before we leave IPOA, because we had yesterday Charles Nichai, former CIC chairperson, and he said at the time when this constitution was being drafted, it was in response to a situation that we had as a country. 207, 208 and everything else that happened. And a lot of it had to do with security. There's the political angle to this. But when then the framers were coming up with institutions that were quote-unquote independent, like now the National Police Service being oversighted by IPOA. So the IPOA was established. But what then the Constitution failed to do was to then come up with mechanisms for enforcing accountability, because that is what we also lacked then in reacting to the situation we had, was where we had police officers being used by, at the time, those who were in power, and we didn't have accountability. So now you're setting up an independent oversight body to oversight the police, but then there was failure to come up with mechanisms or instruments for enforcing accountability, so that now we don't have issues like extrajudicial killings, we don't have issues like abductions, and even from the police side, police welfare and police reforms, and we've seen this tug of war between the IG and the National Police Service Commission and all that. Why was that left out? Because we see these across even Parliament, the role of the Senate and the role of the National Assembly. We see this theme cutting across different parts of the Constitution. Why was it not considered, or there was not enough reflection on this?
I think one is that when this constitution making process, and I'm sure you must have played a bit of it in it, there was a lot of issues that were competing for one attention, two issues that needed to be addressed, and then there were too many bodies that were pushing for different perspectives, and to get a balance of it was not easy. The fact that we got out with something 2010 was commendable. The other thing that we also got out of it was that Nyachai Commission, and that is an aspect where we actually failed to address those issues that needed to have been perhaps addressed then with a clarity. May have been clear to a few people, but majority of others were not as clear in their minds in the way to handle them. So they overpowered, or they overwhelmed, they outvoted those few who may have seen this to the end. And the Nyachai Commission, which was also mishandled, and I don't know whether Nyachai bears any blame for it, I am unable to say no, should have been allowed time, a minimum of 10 years, because there was room to extend their tenure, so that these gaps that are now clear, like the issue, the way IPOA was crafted and the provisions that were done for the National Police Service, those are areas that needed to have been tidied up. And again, you have brought out the issue of the Senate. Again, another area that needed to have been tidied up, with people who had a history of how did we end up with this provision in the Constitution. But you have talked about, and when I was out here, I just remember that when we left Naivasha with the notion that even the issues of women's seats were supposed to have been a sunset clause. So there was quite a bit of tidying up that needed to have been done, but we did not manage the transition of all the other clauses that needed to have been listed after 10 years. But when time for renewing the tenure for Nyachai's commission came, it was not handled well. I don't know whether Nyachai had injured or scared too many people. There wasn't enough energy in Parliament to renew the tenure. It was collapsed quickly. And then what those in Parliament said then was that the CIOC was supposed to take over this exercise. The Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee of Parliament was supposed to take over. But again, then the Speaker of the National Assembly then, after they were supposed to do what Nyachai was doing, that committee was also collapsed in Parliament, but just being made redundant. And perhaps those who were in it also did not quite get the momentum. So I accept there are many areas that needed to have been provided, and there are still gaps that are yearning for, and including the issue of how we manage the resources. Treasury, I don't think that is we intended to devolve and then leave the management of our kitty with the national government. We should have perhaps taken it to a more neutral arbiter. So there are quite a number of things, quite a number of areas that requires to be addressed. As to whether we will have the courage to do so, I see those attempts being done. It was made through the BBI. But again, that didn't come through. We were there in the Nandiko. You could still see some attempts being made to address some of the shortcomings. But again, you can see when addressing one, there is always an attempt to almost claw back the gains from the Constitution.
Courage is a byproduct of will. In some cases, it can be. It can be a byproduct of will. That if I have the desire to do something, that along the way, I can pick up the courage, I can pick up the wherewithal and all of these things to then push, because it's all coming from a place where I have that absolute desire to ensure that this thing has actually been done. Do we see then that there is actually a desire? Is there a will to have some of these things put in place? Because, for example, members of parliament can be recalled by the people who put them there in the first place. According to this constitution that was promulgated in 2010, it is allowed for. However, some of the things that we see, because of the constitution, parliament then comes in to then make laws that will now bring this constitution to life. That's the way it was envisioned. That's the way it's supposed to be. But then there are certain things that then are not allowed to happen along the way. Is this not then a direct contravention of this constitution that is supposed to be one and for all?
You know, this constitution that we have is a really negotiated document. And it was negotiated under very tough circumstances. And this constitution also needed, because of the previous constitution, it also needed to be passed by the same parliament. And remember, this new constitution that is supposed to be passed by parliament is taking away some powers from the parliamentarians who are supposed to implementing. It is introducing accountability issues to members of parliament who are supposed to pass it. So that became another very difficult phase of the constitution. And one of the things you've mentioned was the recall clause, which had been campaigned for, but Kenyans themselves had clamored for that. How do we recall these members of parliament who go there and insult us? They do the things we never wanted them to do, and and it's happening now, perhaps now than even before, because the kind of things I've seen with this parliament was not there during Moi's time, and that clause was meant to deal with that kind of behavior. But what happened when I was in that parliament? What happened is that when that was brought, the question that we had when we were at Naivasha is, hii kitu umeandika hapa ya kwamba ati raia wanaweza toa bunge. Mumeandika namna hiyo na mnataka niende nipitishe nikiwa bunge. Sitapitisha hii nitaangusha hii katiba yote kwa sababu ya hii provision. That was the thing. Members of parliament, I'm talking from, but members of parliament were going to bring down the whole constitution just because you said you are going to recall them. So what did we say? We said, right to recall, but parliament will make laws or regulations. Will provide an enabling
framework,
statute for that to happen. And those of us who perhaps had an understanding of what we were saying, or what we were doing was, yes, wapelekee watatengeneza sheria, which we did, that will make it impossible to be recalled. So one of the things we said when you were in parliament is you cannot recall unless after 2.5 years. You cannot be the one initiating the recall if you are running against me. You cannot run if you are the one who initiated recall. Some very, very clauses that were very sweet to those of us who are making, but making it almost impossible for the recall clause to be ever used or implemented. But we also knew.
You did this intentionally.
We also knew, some of us knew, that if we allow the judiciary to function independently, this act that we have passed will be unconstitutional.
Jeremiah, are you saying
just
that
a minute.
Intentionally?
Let me. You know, I think history will help you, or will help those who are coming after us to know how to deal with some of these things. There was no way the constitution was going to pass in parliament with that recall clause. So we were going to lose all these other things just because of that recall. So it requires a little bit of imagination, and Nakina Onengo and the late Motura Kironzo were there to guide, and it was clear to us that members of parliament will pass a law that will protect them against this. But if the judiciary sits and does what is expected of them, they will do away with that act and call for a better act, which is where we are today. That act was declared unconstitutional. What Parliament has also not done, because there has not been enough pressure, was now to enact another law that will pass the constitutional threshold. Now that is what you heard Wetangula saying. They have not slept over that. The civil society needs to be very vigilant, and now Kenyans, because they now very vigilant on that provision. And of course the court also will help because they declared some specific crosses and constitution that was making it difficult.
But Jeremiah, you speak as though you were, what was done at that time,
I'll tell you something more.
It's as though somebody took a walk to town. And this is actually a little bit more heavy than with what you're giving.
I'll tell you another cross.
Sorry, Jeremiah, you're telling us very nonchalantly now that we essentially sat in Parliament some years ago and decided that there would never be an opportunity for anybody to recall. Based on what you said, there would not be an opportunity, or you wouldn't make it easy for anybody to recall a member of Parliament. And you also knew that you had to essentially limit the powers of the judiciary to do this.
I'll tell you something else that was done.
You did this at the time.
As you sit in judgment.
And why is that okay?
As you sit in judgment, you'll appreciate what sacrifices were also there. There's also the issue of the CDF. The Constitution, this you have seen, now we call it the NGCF. And I've never bothered to call it NGCF because I understand where you're coming from. CDF was left in the Constitution by the very serious constitutional lawyers, and for the same reason that if you take away CDF from these members of Parliament and you want them to pass the document will not pass. Can we be able to pass what we can pass now? Keep this here, it will be challenged in court. Eventually the court will declare it unconstitutional, which has happened. And the members of Parliament have sat there believing that they can pass an amendment to get back the constitution, including some very senior council the members. And you see, they even did an amendment on the floor. But those of us who can recall, we clearly know that unless you have a referendum on that issue, it will never be constitutional. And two, unless you change the form of governance, you will not get CDF with the members of Parliament. Some of that statement I've made now was almost impossible to make 15 years ago.
Jeremiah, I hear you
and
speak.
I can tell you this, because allow me to just speak more. Even now, 95% of members of Parliament have not woken up to this reality. I'll tell you another one that is waiting for us to get into a crisis. The issues of boundaries. I've seen people dealing with these issues. Those who understand, and especially those who've been in the IBC, they know how difficult it will be to deal with the issues of boundaries. But it will require what you have just talked about, character. Why? Today, as we speak here, members of Parliament have no role in the delimitation of boundaries. But all those who are seated in Parliament today will claim that they are the ones who have a role as to where the boundary of a constituency should pass. Why was that denied to members of Parliament? Because it was clear. If you allow members of Parliament to have a say in the boundary delimitation process, nitakata tu kulingana na vile nitashida. So they have no role. But what the amendments that I've seen coming to the floor are amendments that were supposed to claw back and give them a role in the democratic process. But again, that was done, and it is not something that they will read and know that easily. Because again, kama ni kitu together na we give them that civic education, then hiyo katiba ingepita. So a little bit of making it difficult perhaps for myself by letting you into some of the debates that we had at Naivasha.
We're going to come back to that in just a minute, but Dennis has a question. Let's get to that.
Yep. I hear you speak in terms of the Constitution that 2010 that was there, and you look at even the appointment of the Inspector General of Police and how that was supposed to be pushed mostly by the Commission, but that an act was put in Parliament to give the President powers to now appoint the Inspector General. And you talk of the political class doing everything to retain power and ensuring that the Constitution 2010 does not perform as envisioned by the drafters and by Kenyans who voted to have this Constitution. Which brings me to the question, is the political class in this country the reason why we are where we are with the problems that we experience as Kenyans?
A lot of it, no. But let me put it this way. Let me also grow your argument a little. Remember, why we were clamoring for a new constitution is because we were taking that control, not just political control, but literally the control of our lives from the hands of politicians, and more from the hands of the executive. And remember, those days you would elect members of parliament and they would quickly land and sit in the executive, and then they would roll over you. So when you see them even trying to claw back, it is the same game. It is upon us and civil society. Perhaps, I don't know whether members of parliament, a few of them will understand where it is, who have to resist the clawing back. But there is so much comfort in the executive that members are unable to resist. How is it that this current parliament, and not this one, even the previous ones, even the ones we have served in, we have always gravitated back towards where there is money? That is why perhaps also we were talking about the issue of treasury. Did we cushion it enough, or did we leave it again totally at the mercy of the executive? Should we have removed it a little bit from the executive so that this pull towards the executive is reduced? So the political class will never sit to take away power from itself. And the civil society, the Kenyans themselves must continue. And it's one other thing that didn't happen 2010. And this again came about because of things that perhaps we don't have time to talk about. There was the call for civic education. We have a new document, 2010 Constitution, that provides for such enormous power to the people, that power they should have used to ask more for more, or to get what was left hanging dealt with. But that didn't happen. And that's why today we still have Kenyans who don't quite understand, not that the ones who are there 2010, of course we have a new generation, but civic education has never been part of what the executive will do. If we had civic education, for example, and I say this I am not sure that I want to say it, but I will say it because I started saying it. But I hope
already out of the water. Let's go.
Misinterprets it. If we had civic education, we would actually understand what being impeached under our 2010 Constitution means. And we will not be seeing governors or even other people trying to run around and saying that they can run. Once impeached, the Constitution, if Kenyans have been educated well, they will, once impeached, you are actually being told you cannot start galvanizing people behind you because you are only going to mislead them, taking them where? The Constitution has declared you as unfit to ever hold a public office or even lead people into any given direction. So some of this civic education was not given to us, and including myself, there are many articles in the Constitution that I continue understanding every time perhaps it's taken to the
There's a lot of work to be done, isn't it?
And but there is more work to be done by the civil society, because you never expect the executive to do this, and it is also not something that is a one-off thing. So let me say this so that you don't, it goes into the record, that it's not that members of parliament sat it's not that politicians sat to take it away from Kenyans, but it is in the nature of people, and that's why we were saying, where we thought that we needed to a buy-in from members of parliament who are sitting, you then say this particular clause does not come into effect until after X number of years, so that you allow this person who is giving you a good law to also serve for his term, because nobody will sit there and sack himself.
Okay.
So that is the basis upon which some of those clauses were negotiated.
Surely.
And they needed to have been passed. And remember also we had the executive. And the executive also needed to be cushioned. At one point, we were actually required, and this was again at the consternation of Michuki. In that constitution, the only person it mentioned in name was Kibaki. And Kibaki being the Kibaki who was not, after doing anything that perhaps we didn't like, he said, I have no problem. But others were saying, why are you putting his name there? Because we were saying we don't want to leave any doubt that he is not going to run again. You remember we did 2A 1992, and then Moi ran for 10 years. He said, yes, 2A umetoa, lakini sasa hata mimi ni Mkenya ninaanza kuhesabiwa leo. Hawezi kuniwekea sheria ya jana. So he ran us out for another 10 years. But we thought we had finished with Moi in 1992. So when it came to the issues of the constitution, there are clauses we put, and Kibaki's name was mentioned there.
Okay, I have to.
What am I saying is, allow me to just say, because the executive also, we had to get in a lot of buy-in. Where is the problem? The problem is those of us who came after the buying in. And this is where we messed again by sending Nyashai home. Nyashai Commission home. Because it is the commission that had teeth to then bring back some of these areas that needed, were gaps.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying, Jeremiah, but then it does cause a bit of...
And as you do this, don't blame me.
Of course, look, as you're here, then you would then serve as the representative. But the thing is that by your own admission, today, if we should look to Parliament and say that there are things that you must be doing, you talk about the commission, the committees of Parliament, then being the ones that give life to certain aspects of the Constitution by their lawmaking nature.
Yes.
But we are coming from a place where 10 years ago, the same Parliament, by your own admission, had made laws to protect themselves first.
Yeah.
Remembering that these individuals are supposed to be representatives of the people, but you go in to make laws that protect yourselves. We also see that an executive then is not being held to account by Parliament, also because of things that were removed from a Bournemouth draft. How do we expect a Parliament of today, to ensure that the Constitution continues being given life if 10 years ago you ensured that members of Parliament, for example, could not be touched? We are looking at an IEBC today who is telling us that we don't have enough laws to bring about the recall clause for members of Parliament. But that was done clearly by what you've told us 10 years ago. So it's like you're running against the current. It can't work. And it's very clear that was done at your time. How do we remove that today?
If we had Kenyans electing people who had character, those things would be done.
If there were people with character who were putting themselves up for election, perhaps it would be different. If we had Kenyans who elected people of character, that will not be done. So are you saying that sorry, Jeremiah, are you saying that then people who were in Parliament at the time who did the things that you are saying then were not individuals of character? They had character because that's something we had struggled for almost 30 years, but they had the character and the presence of the mind that required some things to be done for us to get a new constitution. You will never take that away from them. And I tell you, those are people who should be celebrated. But thereafter, we seems, including Kenyans, we seem not to have been it's like we quite didn't understand. When you hear that, I think it is, again, I want to say that it is really, I wanted to say, yesterday I attended a church service at Gatundu, burial of an elderly lady who passed on. And put it to the family. And the Mchungaji, the minister, said that he read a place in a book. He could not remember the name of the book or the author, but he could remember he read it in the book. He said, leaders are a reflection of the people who elect them. And he was saying that, I don't know what he eventually wanted to say, but this is a bit. We Kenyans have to decide to elect people who can stand for something, even if it's not provided for in the law. For example, if you then say that we are going to amend this constitution, like now you can learn I
I can make a promise, which is not, let me make one ridiculous thing, that I'm going to allow for public execution. I know Dennis will hit me hard for this. Public execution for anybody who steals public money.
Actually, would want
people would agree. Come on,
bring it today.
I would want to run on that thing, but then it requires character for you to get Kenyans to pass that law, because it is not you. It is your work is to put it on to ensure that they pass it, and you use the proper channel to pass it. Some of us are really disappointed. I am personally disappointed because I may have read a lot of hope on individuals who let us down along the way. But it requires character. This is the bit I'm talking about. It requires character. I honestly would want to put public execution for people who steal our money. But that also requires us to amend the issue, one article in the rights, fundamental rights. And you see the whole world up against us because you see there is, you can, if we even almost took away the death sentence from our laws. So it requires character. And that is what Kenyans must look for. Where we are today, it requires character. Where's the Kini? Yeah, so I think I leave it there.
But if it requires character, and let's assume that's what majority of Kenyans want, and I'm sure if you were to do a poll right here and ask Kenyans this morning, how many of you would vote for a law to execute anyone who steals public funds, I'm almost guaranteed we'll get over 90%. But this thing still has to go through the same parliament that you've given us a very good history, that once it looks at all these things, they will shoot anything down that is not reflective of their interests.
I agree with you, Dennis, but let me ask you, and I ask this not because I want to know where you come from, but which is your constituency? Give me any fictitious one.
Let's say
Kajiado constituency.
East.
Or west or south, southwest. Could be Kajiado southwest. It is your responsibility, Dennis, to ensure that in Kajiado Southwest, you bring a man of character or a woman of character. If we have enough of them, that which we promise to Kenyans, we will deliver. But if it is a question of fake promises and people who can stand and lie in front of you, na unaona tu mu ni muongo, na hapo Wakenya wanampigia kura, and now you can see the circus we are in today, where we are talking of one term. Some of us, we're talking of one term. And one term is a representative of that whole bunch of people who lied to us and have continued to steal our money. I am not here to tell you that I am certain we are not going to produce another one term.
Jeremiah,
if you look at the way people are behaving, and you even talk to the young people and ask him, why are you following X person who is known for all these cadres and the rest? And I am not innocent either. But the person says, siniu anaongea sana. I mean, we are going to, from one term to another one term, until we all have exited this one. The thing is this: the character of the individuals who are elected, the process of vetting, and whether IBC wants to run away from this or not. IBC is one body that has had people who lacked character. When they are out, there is a tribunal that is supposed to be set up by IBC to vet those of us who offer themselves to run. What did they say? They were in a hurry to run away from that tribunal. And through it, we have gotten all the kind of people we have, all the kinds of people we have today, who then sit in parliament, and it's a question of not just self-preservation, it's a question of how much can I get home with. It does not matter. I'll tell you what I told a young person the other day, 2 weeks ago, and I felt very sad. One is a person I have hope for, because I see potential in that person. But then I said, when you're getting home, I am going home now, but I have some 2-3 kilometers that I need to deal with, ya matope. This young person yakaniuliza, umekuwa bunge hiyo miaka yote na hujaeka rami kwako. Now, you see that mindset. And it's a very innocent mindset. I should have done, perhaps. But then you say, at least it's 3 kilometers to my house. There is another person who is doing 20. So I would have used the 5 kilometers that would have brought the other 20 person nearer and kuweka kwangu mpaka nyumbani. So while that, and that is the yardstick that is used by Kenyans. Wewe ulikuwa mjinga kiasi gani haukujifanyia hii mambo yote? Ulikuwa mjinga kiasi gani ya kwamba wewe ni fukara baada ya kuwa bugeni? So there is a whole thing that requires something beyond what we can discuss about here. When you talk about the Gen Zs and pick them, this is a Gen Z person I was talking to. And I respectfully and I'll go back and apologize for having used this as an example because I know I'm in for roasting. But it just hits you and you say, oh God, how are you going to get into this? Because this is, and let me use this narrative of Mheshimiwa Gachagua, whom I give credit for having worked on Ruto. He understands him better than any of us, and I don't think any of us in the opposition who have done what he has done. When he talks about the shareholding principle, and I listened to him last night, I sympathize with him because he has gotten confused between what you'd call one man, one vote, one sharing principle to a shareholding thing. So he interprets it in a manner that is so repulsive to people. But when he was able to explain it like one man, one vote, where you are saying every Kenyan comes before the law as equal and you come before the country's economic pocket as equal. Pata yako ni pata yangu. Usichukue yangu, nisichukue yako. You see, there is quite a bit of work that needs to be done. Na mimi sisemi nilikuja hapa
Jeremiah, let's look at the Constitution 2010, 15 years later. So we look at the Bill of Rights, right to life, right to education, right to health. We look at all these where we sit today, and one would say we've actually gone back to where we were, even worse than how we were before the Constitution 2010, because Kenyans have been given the power. They go to the streets to express themselves. They're shot dead. We talk about the taxes that Kenyans painfully remove every other day, and that is being looted dry. Talk about healthcare. It is worse than how it was even during NHIF days. We talk about education capitation. Yesterday, students went back to school, and parents are being told, serikali bado haijatuma pesa. If you look at what the Constitution provided in terms of all these rights being given to Kenyans, how would you rate the situation today, and what will it take for us to go back?
Terrible, and I'll tell you why. 2024, the month of June 25th, Kenyans, led by Gen Z, came out and said no to Parliament. They were shot outside Parliament. In fact, the people who were shooting them were within Parliament. Something that is very difficult to comprehend. You are being shot from the institution that you put in place to represent your views, and you are going to take your views to them, and they kill you. And Kenyans react the proper way and said, hatutaki hawa wabunge kuja mbele yetu tena. And for a period of time, for about 3-4 months, no member of parliament would dare leave Nairobi, or even no cabinet minister would dare fly the flag. The issue of impeachment of Gachagua comes. And the same members of parliament who voted for this finance bill, and I'm giving it as an example, who voted for this finance bill become the heroes. And they are the ones now to show us where to go. So the Kenyans have forgotten the Lex Masai who was killed because these members of parliament passed a finance bill which we all had rejected. So would you blame the members of parliament or the Kenyans who are given that right by the Constitution and has failed to exercise it? It will take more than members of parliament or the character of members of parliament for this country to change. If Kenyans had maintained that was a paradigm shift. When we were in parliament, we also failed the test. I remember, and I use this respectively again. No, let me not use the name because wakili anaweza ni stuck. But there's a lawyer who was supposed to have taken over the chairmanship of EACC then. He was supposed to have been the first one. Celebrated because he really fought for the 2010 Constitution. But untold whatever, a night before, or 2 nights before, he had a quarrel with the wife. And the quarrel, ilifika pahali mpaka ni kama alifukuzwa ama alifukuza bibi kwa nyumba. One of them left. That issue came into the public limelight the day of voting. And I remember Miri Mabona. She is the one who rose up and said, how can you tell us to entrust the issue of EACC to this Wakili who beat up his wife 2 nights ago? We all voted that lawyer out. That we set that standard. And shortly thereafter, within months, we completely dropped the standard. So it's not a question, because chapter 6 is the soul of the Constitution. And chapter 6, the soul of the Constitution, has completely been ignored, even in the vetting and the rest. So I agree with what you're saying. It's unfortunate that we seem to lose people. Not seem. How do you kill young people? Even during those earlier days, the youth at that ages, at least were being spared, so to speak. But today, it is very scary to see under our new Constitution, you get people still going through the same atrocities. But there is hope here.
There's hope here, and there's a place to end on.
The hope is this one, before you edit.
Okay, go.
If you pull a trigger and kill Lex Masai, I know what they are doing, which they were trying to do to Bridget, the girl at Kiambu. Remember the 12-year-old girl who was shot by a police? He was killed by a police bullet. And they were doing everything on earth to substitute the bullet, which is what is being done. And that is the failure of IPOA. But for police officers, for as long as you execute that illegal and lawful order, na upatikane, hakuna mtu atakuja kutoka mbinguni kukusaidia. It may have been, it may be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later. But if we pursue it as provided for under our Constitution, which is not completely where we would want it to be, we'll still catch up with all those people. So it's upon each one of us to also make sure that we remain respectful to our Constitution, even with the shortcomings.
Jeremiah Kioni says that everybody has a role to play when it comes to the implementation of the Constitution.
Do some bit of investigation on this chicha thing.
Well, this is
when
interesting.
you went down, wizi imekuwa juu.
15 years into Katiba, Secretary General of the Jubilee Party is Jeremiah Kioni. He's been with us. Some interesting observations and admissions this morning in terms of what happened then and perhaps is the reason for things that are still happening today. We continue those conversations. Thank you for being part of that today.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.